Hey folks, this is Sung here. I'm going to presume you all can hear and see me just fine. I'm going to wait a minute or two for people to trickle in. But just to introduce myself, my name is Sung, rhymes with lung like the air you breathe, and I am a solutions engineer. And so, yeah, what that means is I'm a technical, salesperson, and I'm here to solve problems that really matter to people every day. And so, yeah, that's a little bit about me. While we're waiting for people to trickle in, would love some quick intros. Leo, my peer, is going to be the chat moderator, and so he's going to make sure to answer some of your questions live that I can't get to, or explicitly raise his hand and tap me on the shoulder to say like, "Hey, Sung, you should answer this live." And so yeah, I'm excited for what this next hour can look and feel like. All right. And then would love for people to just shout out like where they're tuning in from. I'm tuning in from Los Angeles, LA. So yeah. Hey Nathan, glad to see you from Oregon. That's so fun. All right, cool. I'm gonna start at the 3 minute mark. Alrighty. Nice. West Lynn. Okay. It's a fun name for a place. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Again, for those that trickled in, I'm Sung. I'm a solutions engineer. I'm gonna be leading you through this public demo. In addition to that, Leo, my teammate, is going to be moderating the chat and answering your questions live. And so he'll tap me on the shoulder if anything is worth answering verbally live from me. But I'm pretty excited to show you what this is all about and take you through a little journey here. So I'm gonna go ahead and start sharing my screen, and let's just like get straight into it. All right, give me one moment here. All right, perfect. Nice. You should be able to see this slide that starts with Datafold. The main agenda is covering through like what problems are actually worth solving for in the first place. In addition to that, going through, what that full life cycle can look like, from like making my code changes in DBT, for example, and flowing that all the way through into production. And so, yeah, but the main thing is to anchor this in a couple of story points, where I think the best place to start is anecdotally, where I think a lot of us can resonate with some of these quotes where it's like AR dashboard is broken. I think something went wrong. Like, can you fix it? And it feels like a lot of these like resound into this kind of collective theme where it feels like our KPIs go from shipping data pipelines to make or save money to, hey, how can I reduce my Slack fire drill notifications from 30 times per week to like 10 times per week? Or how do I reduce number of times random stakeholder yells at me, right? And so much so, it feels like our craft has defaulted to playing defense rather than actually like playing a full game of the data craft. And what this looks like in a more specific story is like, hey, like stakeholder says like, hey, numbers look bad, but if you had something like Datafold or DataDiff, you could have easily prevented these little embers here before they turn into this big fire over here, where the frustrated stakeholder is is, essentially yelling at you. I know I've had that in my 7+ years of data engineering. And I think what's just so tragic about the story is like how normal it is for so many people, even if they're using the best in class tools. And I saw this firsthand when I was at DBT Labs for 2+ years, helping people get started and mature their DBT evolution, and still seeing these fires pop up in their everyday life. And I just don't want that to be normal. And that's a big reason why I joined Datafold. And so what that could look and feel like looks like this. And so let's take that same story that I anchored us to, and let's see what that could look and feel like with a new developer workflow. So, Chung, I'm an analytics engineer. I'm tasked with updating, my dim orgs model to something more accurate. We were using some like old funky static, tables as a ref. And so I had to switch that out. And so I made simple changes that look like this, or essentially I'm going to maximize this a bit. Or I made simple changes that look like this, or essentially I'm switching out the sign-in table for this org created at. We were not properly accounting for individual users when we were segmenting out our revenue plans. And so we want to make sure we're capturing them versus just getting a bunch of blanks so they can do much more proper analysis. And so what I would typically do here after this is probably, make a quick preview of this. And so I press enter. Right now I'm using the DPT Power User extension, get some context on this, and then look at the lineage and go like, okay, yeah, this generally makes sense to me so far. Make sure, that this is syncing with the columns that I expect. Okay, that's cool, but it's not really telling me the full picture of like the before and after at a row level. Yeah, I'm getting a quick preview. Yeah, I get to see the code diff, but I'm still playing guessing games as to like how exactly have things changed before and after, right? And so that's where when I do something like this, what I'm doing is I'm materializing that dim orgs model in my development schema and then running that against production. And so what this is doing is, essentially doing a full auto join between dev and prod that you see over here, and just giving me some quick summary stats. Now I think to myself like, okay, this is cool and all, but like I want something a bit more supercharged here, right? That's where we have the Datafold VS Code extension over here. I already have it installed, but instead of having to play those guessing games and only look at this, directional guidance, I can click over here, press this play button, and I'll do the same thing and give similar kind of summary stats, but also give me a whole lot more. And you'll see that in just a moment here. So over here, it opened that new tab for me to look at, very similar stats. But what's this here? When I click onto this, I get much more context over the things I care about, where I see, oh, hey, I noticed I removed these 11 rows. Oh, whoa, I noticed like these are the things that changed across, the things I care about. And what's nice about this is like you build this natural intuition and you get to react to the work that you're doing versus having to make these explicit assertions of like, oh, did I do exactly this right? Or did I make sure that prod looks like this going forward? Now I don't even have to have that inner dialogue. I just get to react to what Datafold is doing for me, where essentially I get this clear before and after story of like, here's prod, here's dev. Okay, that makes sense. I get to move on with my life, get some directional guidance, and make sure I get to uncover any surprises along the way. I know I remove rows, but it's important to know like, oh, okay, like, do I want to remove these rows, right? And I get to use my human judgment where it matters most to really determine, hey, is this actually a good or bad diff in the first place? Now, in addition to this, where it's like, hey, I want to be able to easily share these results. I probably don't want to screenshot these data diffs each time with my teammates. And so that's where all I have to do is add a cloud flag that looks like this. And let me go back to VS Code. And you notice here, it launched something. It's running that data diff. And it's going to take me to the Datafold UI into something shareable over here. And I get a very similar summary report. But you notice a couple of other things here where I also get lineage dependency. And so if you're using things like Looker, and we're right now going to release Tableau in a couple of weeks here, I get to see full dependencies there. I get to see this values tab over here. Very similar premise of understanding what's changed over time. I get to see some of those exclusive primary keys I'm dropping from prod. I get to see a distribution of those changes. And a simple example is like, oh, hey, I noticed in the subplan that I'm going to be adding a net new like category there, which makes sense that none of it exists in prod. And so all of these things that ad hoc would take me 30 minutes. And I mean that very literally, because I used to try and replicate a lot of these things. Now happens in a couple seconds to build context over all of this stuff. In addition to like, oh, hey, I get to look at lineage over here. And I'll get to that in a bit when we talk about more CI/CD workflows. But what's really nice about this is like, instead of screenshotting, I can literally just share this URL with a teammate and just move on with my life, all within, a couple seconds to a minute, depending on how big your table that you're diffing is. And what's just so nice about this workflow is not necessarily like the cool new things that it does, but it's like all the boring toil that just gets to melt away from your workflow. So think of all the scrappy ad hoc SQL you had to do for ad hoc joins. Think of the random row counts. Think of the random select star from limit fives. Think of like how many times you have to like run git stash on your changes, or like, undo this and like uncomment, recomment to like change the results and look at the previews. Like all those little paper cuts in your workflow just get to kind of disappear. And I think that's what's so powerful about this tool is like you just get to be much more immersed in how you actually do your job versus always having to play these weird second guessing games throughout. Okay, so that's the developer workflow. Now, let's say I've done all this stuff. I even have that shareable URL I just showed you. But I'm thinking to myself like, hey, I actually want this in a pull request workflow so that it's actually persisted and I can have a much better sense of collaborative ergonomics here, right? And so that's where we have this. And what's really nice about this, I'm going to put this in the chat. This is publicly available and viewable today. And so you can call me out if you think I'm just sharing some snake oil with you folks. But again, same kind of role playing here. It's like, I'm an analytics engineer. I make these changes that you just saw in dev. And I think to myself, okay, I think these are pretty innocent changes. My Slim CI job has a green check mark. But again, I'm still playing those kind of weird guessing games of like, what exactly is going to happen in prod? So I know that when I merge this, I'm not going to like, have 10 people yell at me that one little nuance was off, right? And that's where you get a similar summary report automatically here, where you get to see the things that did or did not change. And what's really nice about this is like, it gives you kind of a clear signal to noise ratio of like, here's the signal sung, here's the noise, in addition to some of these dependencies. And when I click onto this, it'll take me to the Datafold UI, and then it'll show me, that same kind of before and after story that I showed you earlier. But what's really cool on top of this is you get to see lineage that looks like this, where essentially it's like, hey, like, it looks like the changes I'm making are going to affect this really important kind of revenue dashboard in Looker. That's where I click onto this. I'm going to show more upstreams. And then over here, you're going to see full column level impact across all the things that I care about. And so let's say just, as a simple example, it's like, hey, I made a major change to this sum revenue column. I want to know how it's flowing through all the way, upstream and downstream. And you get to literally see that all the way from, my raw layer up here and how it flows through. So that the problem that this solves for is like, hey, like if I'm going to update this major dashboard, how exactly will I do it? It's just through this single column if I only updated the logic for that. And so if a stakeholder complains like, hey, Sung, like when I was looking at this Looker Explorer, like the count subscriber number feels off, I get to have this natural starting point where it's like, hey, I'm pretty sure it wasn't my logic because I did not change anything there for a fact. It's probably the source data that's messed up. I have a much better place of, places to investigate, to ignore now, versus I could be much more hyper-focused on the actual problem that's likely the cause of making that count subscribers column look funky, right? In addition to that, I get to see, just to verify some, SQL logic, just to make sure it's doing exactly like what I expect. And what's really powerful about this is it's not relying on the DBT manifest. It's relying fully on query history to marry the logic and the lineage across Snowflake and across Looker and your BI tools. And so this even shows accidental lineage outside of your DBT ecosystem. And so let's say you just turned off DBT all of a sudden, this lineage would still work out of the box because you rely on your database in order to build it in the first place. So yeah, that's about it there. To extend this workflow even further is like, because this is really within the T and ELT, right? I think what's also really powerful about this is, and keep in mind, we're still early with this, but you can do cross-database validations as well, or that same mechanic of diffing across dev and prod also applies to your raw layer. So let's say, in this case, I'm migrating from Redshift to Databricks, or in a more realistic case where you're, replicating data using Fivetran across Postgres and Snowflake, we can do that data diff too, where you can see like, hey, I want to make sure, um, I want to know for a fact, like, hey, is my raw data actually causing the issues, or is it my logic that is causing the issues when it comes to someone saying that data looks funky or bad, right? And you get to see that clear before and after story as well. And if you want to materialize those results in a respective table, you can, so you can investigate them later and share them with your teammates. But what's really powerful about this, again, isn't necessarily how cool these mechanics are, which I think they are, but it's like all the boring toil that just gets to melt away from your workflow just because you have this simple mechanic of diffing, just to show you like, hey, here's the clear before and after story. Now I know my place to start to make sense of what problems are taking place. And if this is zeroed out, you're like, all right, I know for a fact that like things are good. That, like, let's say this is like zeroed out, no diffs. Like, okay, so it's probably my logic that messed up something downstream, right? And so, yeah, that's pretty much everything I wanted to share here. Um, what's really cool about this is, like, you notice it only took me about like 15 minutes to go through this entire workflow from development and the CLI using extension all the way to deployment. And that's kind of the point. No, we're not here to inundate and flood you with a bunch of features under the sun. The core problem we want to solve for is like, how do we get you as immersed as we can into the work that you love and that you care about? And when things go wrong, that you don't have to scramble for 30 minutes each time, with a Swiss Army knife that's like shuttily built. You just get to diff things and make sense and gain context and move on with your life. And so, yeah, that's pretty much everything I wanted to show with folks, just by design. And so the rest of this time, happy to, field questions. I'm going to take a look at the chat in a little bit here. And then, yeah, we'll do some freeform jazz. All right. I'm going to stop sharing Shazam, and I'm going to look at the chat. And then let's see here. Okay, chat is mostly Leo so far. So, I mean, Leo, if you want to join the stage, feel free to do so now. We can do this like fireside chat style and just like answer any questions along the way. So, yeah. Yeah. What's up, Leo? Thanks for holding down the fort there. I guess I'll ask a question, a simple question to the chat, like just, quick word or two, like what resonated the most with what you saw that I just demoed here? And if it's nothing, like, happy to evolve that answer into something. All right.
Fair point. Yeah. If nothing resonated, then we'll, that's something we'd also like to know. Looks like we're getting some answers. I would like to just add, and thanks, Sung, for kicking it off. Very, very smooth, slick, efficient demo. Impressive that you got all that done in 15 minutes. And so I want to just share something that came up yesterday for me. So we use Datafold internally at Datafold. We also use Looker and DBT, and I was trying to figure out the other day why one of our Looker dashboards that has information about every customer we have was not, one of the customers was showing up as basically having no data. And when I looked at our another data source, I was like, that doesn't seem right. And indeed, they'd been diffing regularly. They were like, seemed to be getting a lot of value out of the tool. I checked in with them. They were like, yeah, we love it. So I was like, okay, the problem is our Looker dashboard. And basically what I found was, there was a slight inconsistency with the name of the company and the way it was stored in the Datafold app, the way it was stored in Salesforce. But to get there, I had to navigate from this dashboard, figure out like what Explorer went into it, figure out what went into that Explorer. And I found I was like living the dream. I'm just going through lineage, following those lines that Sung was showing you up and down the DAG, within DBT, but also outside of DBT. And that was just really cool to experience. Like the thing we're building is actually helping me in my work. And finally, I'll note that little moment in the demo where you showed the SQL query that generates the table. I can't emphasize, like, that's very useful. Like, you can actually then just like say, oh, this is the query that built the table. Let me now, investigate each CTE. And it just, rather than like digging around the query history or like compiling it in DBT, and then it's just right there in front of you. So that was pretty cool to see. So, Song, I gather you're probably looking at Carolyn's question, and you're
Yeah,
hoping.
yeah, I am, and I'm going to read it just for everyone else. I spend most of my time trying to understand the differences in data sets based off a simple change, and I think the data diff would be incredibly helpful. Can you talk a bit about how to make sense of things when you look at very large data sets with a lot of differences? I'm happy to answer, but Leo, do you want a chance to shine here? I'll leave it up to you.
Well, yeah, I can start off. I want to hear what you add as well. So, very large data sets with a lot of differences. So there was something in the demo, Sung, that you showed that if you don't mind pulling up, I think the column profiles tab is the way to go. And so there are kind of three levels you can look at a data diff. There's the summary, there's the value level difference, and then there's the distribution difference. And so the summary is what gets printed in the pull request, and you can kind of see a version of it there. It shows row count, percent differences in each column, primary key differences. The values tab is that classic data diff, right? You see on the left and right, and that's where we say it's like a code, it's like a get diff, but for your data. And that often is like a light bulb. But the next question is what Carolyn's bringing up, which is, well, okay, I have a billion rows in this data set. I can look at the number of differences in each column. I can look at a sample of differences, but I want to know the pattern shift, right? And that could be what you need in order to understand how the data is different. You need to see not just the very high level summary, but a distribution shift. So if you pull up that column profile, that and some of these end up being like not as informative, but if you scroll down, I think there's a couple in there at least where you can start to see, in that date one, where you might look at like many different individual data diffs on a row level, but that wouldn't tell you that in the dark blue, which I guess is the feature branch, there are no values below, late June 2022. If you scroll down a bit more in the sub plan, you can see all the individual plans disappeared. And that's information that you actually wouldn't be able to get from the value level diff or from a diff saying, there's many differences in subplan. You need to see the distribution shift. So that's my answer for that one. What do you think, Sam? Anything to add there?
I was literally going to go through that same flow. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I really love how there are different levels of dimensions. Like that, to me, answers most of the questions that I would have about a
yep,
data diff.
same. And so it looks like Carolyn, you're typing. Hopefully this answers, but perfect, nice. Glad to answer your question, Carolyn. Let's see. Any other questions from the crowd here? Anything that feels like is missing from this conversation?
I would like to kind of ask the attendees to consider answering a one or two of the questions I put up above. We're really interested in seeing if like folks are primarily using DBT or if there are other orchestrators where you would want to apply this. This does all work outside of DBT, but we've like very much been playing in the DBT space. And so like if you are a DBT using a team, then this is a great fit. If you're not, then we are looking to get started and bring on, frankly, more teams who are using any of the orchestrators under the sun, because they are all supported. So we got Dagster, Airflow, whether that's Astronomer or MWAA. I don't know if there's others that come to mind for you. Kabula.
No, I think
Or
that's
procedures.
yeah. I mean, sounds like a good
It's a
number.
good start. Yeah. For me, like the whole idea is that I suppose the one requirement for all of this is that the code that supports your orchestration is version controlled, because that's kind of at the heart of, at least for the CI use case. We do have some really interesting scenarios where customers are running diffs ad hoc using the API or the UI, and then they can like just essentially just like launch a diff on one table. It's like a space launch, and then they get their result, and if it's a really important table and a really important change and they're being audited, then it's almost less about the automation and more about like, we just need to know these exact results. So.
Yeah.
See, what else could we touch on? So Sung, I know you mentioned the cross database replication and migration story. That's another thing that is like a big launch of ours, I guess, or like a somewhat new focus, right? We've been diffing in CI for years and years, but we're starting to see a lot of traction around teams that are validating their migrations, or they want to make sure their data move from point A to point B. Yeah, and I guess that was my other question for the chat, for all of you out there. Are any of those of interest to you? Is this like more about CI, making sure your code changes aren't breaking stuff, or are you wondering if your data made it from point A to point B? I don't know, maybe some you have an anecdote about that from your past data career, if people are going to jump in, or we can just chat more.
Yeah, I mean, some of the hardest parts of the work I was doing in my data engineering career was just like validating the extract and load process did everything I wanted it to do, right? And so like a simple example is like, hey, I'm drawing out data from Oracle or SQL Server or like Postgres into BigQuery or like Snowflake, and just making sure it's like apples to apples as part of my pipeline, not in CI, but like during that scheduled process, right? And just making sure at the very least, like, hey, if there's data drift, like I want to know that before I run the rest of my downstream pipeline. And if it's like below a certain threshold, yeah, it's good to go. Because there are so many times where like I went through a whole transformation exercise just to realize like, oh, I have incomplete records. And just as a fun fact, I did like data engineering in the accounting world at PwC. And I would literally, work super hard to make debits literally equal credits just to find out, oh, like the data that the provider gave me is wrong. I need to go back and ask for a new extract of that data in order to make sure that this transformation logic is going to work properly. And so like you're going to see some stuff in the next coming weeks with just some content we're going to create with Daxter and with Datafold here that you folks can get started with just to like validate replication and even do some other creative stuff there too. So yeah, that's my answer to that question, Leo.
Cool. Yeah, so I think if there's no other questions from the chat, we can start to wrap up. Feel free to jump in, but yeah, definitely excited about the cross database diffing opportunity that we're hoping to get out there. A couple of connectors that we've shipped lately include Oracle, SQL Server. I know we have support for various formats in S3, data that may be stored in S3. So we're really like looking to just kind of cover the whole market of possible data diffing needs. And yeah, I think that's about all I had to say. So yeah.
Oh, actually, just one thing. I know we've been doing this more recently, but Leo, do you have that link to share if people want to book time with us just to set up free CI?
Yes. So what I did, the link I dropped in the chat, I'll share it again. This will essentially book a meeting with me or Sung and the team, just to kind of talk about, we can take it in any direction you want. We have a few different links, but we're not going to push you in any which way. The point is we can, advise you on, or just chat about whether it's your CI setup, you're looking to, build a staging data, right? Because building staging data is essential to using Datafold. You have to be able to compare something to something. So the link says book a demo, but you've already seen the demo, so we can kind of breeze through that part and talk more about your specific use case if any of this resonates.
Very cool.
The other link I dropped, Sung, just FYI, and to explain this to the crowd, is this org signup link. So pretty excited about how now you can get a Datafold trial going without talking to one of us, which I don't know why you would want to do it that way, but that's a joke. I do know why. And so you can just go ahead and do that. Now, you might be hearing from us because we want to make sure that you have a good experience. And of course, if you want to turn the trial into a longer term engagement, then we would help you do that, and we'd make that as painless as possible. But basically, we want you to be able to kick the tires on Datafold, see what it's like. There is some setup, connecting your database, connecting to GitHub, setting up your orchestrator tool. And so please reach out if you're doing that and something is and you have a question. But you can definitely get a fair bit of the way there, get your first diff running. You only need to do the data source connection in order to run your first diff. So you don't have to do all those other pieces I mentioned. So the other thing I want to share, since we're here and we have a bit of time, is our handy ROI calculator. So just to get very nuts and bolts about this, I know budgets are tight for everyone, and this is something that does sometimes make the difference in terms of advocating for a tool if you think it is right for you. And sometimes a finance or procurement team needs to see, why you would want to add another tool to your stack. And so that can give you something polished to share. And yep, so those are a few resources. We'll be posting more on social media in terms of blog content to share more about what we've been talking about. So it's not just hearing us talk. We'll add something that you can really dig into.
All right. I think that's a beautiful wrap up. Thanks everyone. I know time and energy are precious, so thank you for sharing yours with ours. All right.
Hey, Sung, before you wrap up, all right, Nathan's just saying thanks. Okay, so please follow up, pick up those links. You can always reach out by email, by the Tools Datafold channel in Slack, as I think Sung may have mentioned. What's another way to get in touch? I would say going to datafold.com and then saying book a demo is probably a pretty easy way to reach out.
Yeah. And if you're you want to go pretty informal and just DM us, I can just share my LinkedIn profile. And I'll accept your connection. I love talking with people. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay.
All right. Beautiful. Thanks, everyone. Peace out, Eagle Scouts. Bye.